Okay. Can Harshit come down for just for a while because the sounds are overlapping? Thank you. Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the artist talk by Harshit Agrawal. And thank you, Harshit, for coming today to give us your talk. So, the artist of today is Harshit Agrawal, who is an artist working with artificial intelligence as well as emerging technologies. And he was the only Indian artist among 7 international AI art pioneers at the first global group exhibition of AI art at a contemporary gallery in 2018. And he has worked with AI art since its inception in 2015, and his work has been nominated twice for the top international tech art prize, the Lumen. And he has also curated the India's first AI NFT exhibition, Intertwined Intelligences for Terrain Art, with 6 global AI artists. So today he will talk about his works and thoughts around AI and NFT technologies. And the title of his talk is AI Art in a Digitally Native World of NFTs. So the program will last approximately for an hour, consisting of his talk followed by the Q&A session. So if you have any questions for him, please come to this podium spot where I'm standing right now, so that he can hear you and ask him questions. And if you do not have microphone at the moment, but have questions for him, please click on the chat icon on the left tab and set the target to everyone or just me, and enter your questions on the chat room and I'll read them out for you. So now let's welcome Harshit Agrawal by giving him a big round of emoticons. So Harshit, please come up to the front for the talk. Thank you.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you can't hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Then should I share my screen? And can you see my screen also?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah. So thank you first of all for having me here. It's really exciting to be part of this event, especially because I have a special relationship with Art Center Nabi. I did an art residency in 2016 there. Um, Also working with artificial intelligence, that was very early in the AI art world in general, because yeah, only around 2015 the modern day AI art sort of genre had started. So Art Center Nabi was one of the first to identify and bring together like a residency for me to do around that topic, which is really nice. So it's great to be back working with Art Center Nabi. And today I want to talk about AI art, which is my practice as an artist and a curator. And especially in the context of a digitally native world that we are entering into. And in this digitally native world where everything, almost all our experiences are mediated through a digital reality, like even the conference we are having, Gather Town, is such an interesting platform. It's become so common to sort of have these digital conferences, digital meetups, and whatnot. And because of that digitally native culture of ours, NFTs become really interesting because they are, in some sense, a new digital asset class that where the ownership, transaction, everything is purely digitally happening. So yeah, that is sort of the 3 parts of the talk in some sense, focusing mainly on AI art because that is the main thing. And then obviously NFTs is something that are in a simplistic sense a token that you can tokenize anything of, right? So you can create a token of anything. So I will talk largely about my AI art practice. And so why am I interested in AI art, right? And what are some key things that I think make AI art exciting? One is this idea of human augmentation, which is built into AI art. The idea that um, that you can use, I mean, you use mostly any technology as a means to expand the sense of what you can do. Either it's overcoming some sort of physical limitation, but with AI, what happens is we're also sort of very keenly expanding on the notion of what intelligence means. Our intelligence is no longer, deeply rooted within our biological brain, but it's very increasingly sort of being spread between our biological brain and the digital tools that we interact with, be it our phone, be it sort of various apps. So, in some sense, we provide data to them and they process that data and in turn help us make decisions about our lives, which is becoming more and more common. The other is this continuum which is forming in terms of creativity too. Um, Earlier, the notion of human creative or the artistic genius was quite prevalent, where the idea was that for art to happen, an artist sits in a room and comes up with this sort of sudden burst of creativity and creates art. But that has been already started to be problematized by sort of artists like Marcel Duchamp and all the ready-mades that he's made, or the automatism world of art and so on, where uh, it's questioning sort of, is human the only sort of sole inspiration of genius? And it becomes very interesting with AI because here what at least I'm trying to explore is this idea where uh, you as the human artist sort of define a direction, but you leave enough room for influence from the machine during your creative process. The third aspect, which is what new kind of art this enables, is sort of data driven art, where up till now you couldn't take like millions of images, for example, and process them to get a general sense of what those images look like or what that music or text looks like, and AI allows to do that. So in some sense, like notions like what does some universal concept like gender mean or something like that, now you have a way to present that through actual like data collection and data interpretation. The last is sort of we are all in a digital technological reality. So our art has to sort of uh, comment on that, what it means to exist in such a reality. And in some sense, we are moving to a post human world where it's not just humans that are at the core of everything that we do, but it's sort of a mix between humans and digital beings. Um, so yeah, having said that and set that context, I want to talk about a few projects in this space. This one is called a flying pantograph, where the idea is to use a drone as a drawing agent. So, inherently breaking out from the physical limitations of our human body, using a drone as a means to be able to extend our arm infinitely, in some sense, to be able to draw at any remote location. So what happens is there is a pen attached to a drone, and as someone makes some motions on a far off table, the drone captures those motions and replicates them in real time. And because obviously it is digitally mediated, you can do things like scale up the drawing in the drone or mirror it, or add a little bit of its own motion to it and so on. The next set of projects, so with the drone, there's no like hardcore intelligence built into it. It was simply a means of human augmentation. But next set of projects will be more about uh, the intelligence aspect of machines too, which largely began with the Google Deep Dream project. At least the modern day AI art scene sort of began to a large extent when Google came out with this Deep Dream project. And for me also, it was very interesting to see these very abstract, surreal kind of images. And one of the first projects that I did in this space was called Tandem, which was it's an interactive artwork, um, and what here the project is about is creating this simple drawing software, which you see on the left, but with an AI built into it. So if you draw something, you hit this imagine button. The machine, which is trained on millions of images, sort of recognizes or tries to find out what it sees within this image and then completes it. So, for example, it sees this what most of us would think of as a pen in an ink bottle. It sees that as a bird and creates a bird body around it. And for example, here a human drew this input, which most of us would interpret as leafless trees in a deserted land, but the machine sees them as these dogs with large ears. So this becomes very interesting because the machine is able to offer, creative completion to something that you did in a way which is very unexpected a lot of times. So it really becomes a dialogue between you and the machine in terms of creative expression. Um, and then you can, of course, take this and edit this or redraw this to move in a certain other direction. So here's a screen capture of how this works. You draw something, you hit this imagine button. There are different modes like pencil, color, etc., figurative, abstract, and the machine. I'll play this back again. The machine then slowly sort of tries to interpret. So for example, this part, it's interpreted it like some sort of a car, this part somewhat like birds, and so on. So it really offers this other perspective of looking at your own input drawings. And this is actually an image, two images from Art Center Nabi. During my residency, I built part of Tandem at Art Center Nabi, and then sort of exhibited it there at the Art Center Nabi art space. Uh, the other so this last one sort of used a technology called convolutional neural networks for object detection in some sense, and then reversing the process of object detection to for the machine to identify objects and then change the pixels to make the image more like that object. But next set of projects is largely about this using this technology called generative adversarial networks, which have become very popular in sort of the AI art space over the last 3-4 years. And what generative adversarial networks allow you to do is, given any kind of input data, let's say images or samples of music or text, whatever, it basically learns a pattern within that data set and is able to generate new data which resembles that original data set. So it's very interesting and a very sort of beautiful architecture where there is one neural network which is called the generator, which is trying to generate a realistic looking image, and sort of a discriminator which is trying to guess if that image is coming from the real training data set itself or from the generator. So initially the discriminator is able to guess quite accurately because the generator is very poor, but over time the generator learns and gets better, and then the discriminator is not able to tell if it's the input it's getting is from the training set or from the generator. and at that time, sort of the machine is able to produce realistic looking artwork. For me, obviously, as an artist, realism is probably not the most key thing, but this framework of a GAN gives me a lot of like ability to play around with the aesthetics, the visual outcome in a lot of ways. Like I can decide how quickly the machine is learning, till what point I wanted to learn. Maybe I wanted to learn only half of sort of um, its capacity and start sampling from that, etc. So a lot of like possibilities of playing around with the algorithm to get different visual results. Uh, in some sense, to draw a rather simplistic analogy with traditional art and AI art, I see that um, in traditional art, sort of the raw material that you work with is the paint pigments, let's say, which is analogous to the data in the AI art world, where you collect data or curate data, and that becomes your raw material. And then you manipulate that raw material with paintbrushes in the traditional world, and in the AI world, you would manipulate that data with AI algorithms. So one recent project that I did called Strange Genders sort of captures this analogy quite nicely, where what we did is sort of began by collecting these thousands of images of gender representations of India. So how people represent gender male and female, and we wanted to understand this sort of take some binary concept of gender and then reinterpret that through sort of the machine lens. So what we did is collected about 2,300 drawings by people of India, given the prompt of drawing a standing female form and a standing male form, and then used a GAN to generate these sort of machine imagined views of what gender looks like. Um, uh, sorry, one second. So then the idea was, okay, we've got training data, which was how people sort of represent gender. Then we've used a machine to generate GAN outputs from it. Uh, and then what we also did is take the original data set and train a simple classifier, a binary classifier, which is just two classes, female and male, and be able to sort of given an input drawing, the machine then tells us if with what percentage confidence it thinks it's a female. Like it could tag the image as 100% female, 80% female, 60% or whatever, like 92% female, and so on. So essentially, then what we did is we passed sort of the GAN outputs through this trained classifier to get these labeled gender drawings, and then arranged them in the circular form with 100% female drawing at the center, sort of radiating outwards towards 0% female at the outermost radius. Um, so yeah, the next project that I want to talk about is Masked Reality. This is also an interactive project, and here what happens is I work with traditional Indian face painting rituals for dance performances that happen in India, and use AI to sort of then take the input as a human face and transform that to these dance painting faces, essentially. So here, the idea how it works is to train what is called a conditional GAN, which is able to create some new material. Like earlier, it was just data of let's say gender drawings, and it would create a new gender drawing. But here it is trained to take a face as an input, and using that as a conditional sort of input or vector, it's able to transform that or generate based on that a face of this cultural representation essentially. So here again, it's being shown at some exhibition, and the idea is for people to see themselves both as this, both in terms of both these dancers. One is a male form and one is a female form. So it also pokes at this idea of identity, where you're seeing yourself in multiple identities simultaneously. The Mask series also has static artworks, 2D painting artworks, where I train a collection of Indian masks with, which is mixed with a collection of human faces to generate these sort of semi-human, semi-mask kind of outputs. And there's also 3D version of this where I create first 2D images and then sort of use 3D modeling to model 3D outputs from that, and then 3D print them, paint them, and generate these 3D printed sculptures. Um, the next project that I want to touch upon quickly is called the Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Algorithm. The idea with this project was, this was quite early, almost 3 years ago that I did this work, was to use GANs, more of a conceptual project, use GANs to look at the insides of the human body. And so what I did for this is collect a data set of about 60,000 surgical dissection images, so images of surgery essentially, and then train a machine to draw from that. And this was inspired from one of Rembrandt's earliest and most well-known paintings called The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tull, where uh, sort of Rembrandt was capturing this, like you can see the expression of people, like sort of this surprise and fear of medical technology, which was starting to rise during the Renaissance at that time, when people were being allowed to sort of operate on other people, cut open other people. And we are in a similar sort of disturbed fascination or troubled fascination with AI today. So I wanted to create a piece where you're using the machine to, you're exposing the machine to very sort of raw human in some sense, and getting the machine to interpret and create its own interpretations from that. And in some sense, also pointing out that, yeah, for a machine, this is what human is like, not all the glory of intellect and all that. This is sort of what it is, the hardware of the human body. um, and yeah, like I mentioned, AI art also for me is a comment on technology and sort of our post-human existence with it. So an existence which is not purely limited to our physical bodies, biological bodies in terms of physical aspects, also mental, intellectual aspects. So to explore this notion, I made this piece called Authorize, uh, which was presented at Ars Electronica and some more places. And the idea here is, it's a simple handwriting setup. It's also an interactive AI work where the human starts writing something, and then after 10 seconds the machine takes over control of their hand. So as you're writing, there is a magnetic plotter system under the table, which essentially starts moving and attracting the tip of your pen to move your hand to continue that writing. So whatever, uh, so whatever input you give the machine, which is the human writing input, the machine reads that based on optical character recognition. So that handwriting is read as some text, and that text becomes an input for what is called an LSTM, or a long short term memory neural network, which is essentially a neural network where you can give sequential data. Data which has a sequence, like music or text, which sort of goes one after the other, and that sequence matters. Not like images, which is just one sort of set of pixels at one time. It's more like a movie, for example, where the sequence of that images or sequence of that text matters. So you can give a sequence of input to an LSTM. It can learn sort of the probability of, given one input, what should be the next input, or what should be the next output. And once you've trained that LSTM, it's able to generate text of its own. So it's essentially a text generation system. And nowadays there are more modern ones like GPT-3, which you might have heard, which got popular in the recent INFT, or Intelligent NFT, that Robert Ellis launched with Sotheby's. So essentially, yeah, coming back to authorize, the human writes something that is read by the machine, that becomes input text for a text generation system. The text generation system has been trained on philosophy books to write sort of meta outputs, and the text that it generates is then again converted back to human handwriting based on being trained on thousands of samples of human handwriting. And then that human handwriting is used to move a magnet and ultimately write through the human hand. So the idea essentially is to bring about this loss of agency, or the loss of authorship, while creating something simple like writing a piece of paper. So you begin by writing something like freedom of man is, and then the machine writes a myth, what, who is a moral and a nice person of the state to say the truth. So it writes sort of this slightly abstract philosophical thing, but the experience is this sort of loss of control and loss of agency, uh, and where for a large part of the interaction you're just acting as a robotic arm for the machine instead of doing any real physical or intellectual work. And what is interesting is when sort of this work is shown, I ask people if this final piece of writing belongs to them, or is it the machine. And a lot of time people say it's their work, even though for almost 80-90% of the interaction, they're just simply holding a pen and not doing anything more. So this idea of people still relying or thinking of humans as the center of every interaction, and it already is happening with our apps, or like recommendation systems online and e-commerce or whatnot, where um, most of your decisions are actually influenced heavily by the machine, by a data-driven AI of the companies that own that app or something like that. And but you still feel like, oh, you are in control of all that you're doing. So bringing that to an extreme level where your physical body itself is being controlled by this other intelligence maybe makes you start thinking a little more deeply about your relationship with technology. Um, so yeah, these were sort of a range of my AI artworks, but I also want to quickly touch upon this exhibition called Intertwined Intelligences, which is actually my first curatorial project. And it is also India's first AI NFT exhibition. So, since a lot of you are interested in AI and NFT, you can check this out. It's with six very interesting pioneers of AI art, international artists. Working with very interesting practices, and sort of these are two works, or actually there are four works. These are two from them that I'm showing as part of the exhibition, which is called Latent Landscapes. And the idea here is to have generated landscape images from AI or machine learning, and then animate those. So the AI generated landscapes look real, but when you sort of see them more closely, you realize that, yeah, there is some sort of uncanniness to it, or physics is quite not right. And then also adding the motion probably blurs that distinction a little more, where the motion is also realistic, but the sort of composition is a little uh, artificial. So just playing around with this idea of blurring the aspects of physical reality and then digital reality, and uh, just showing this other project is also very interesting by Sofia Crespo and Entangled Other Studio, where they generate these 3D AI generated bugs or insects, uh, and then sort of add animation to them, uh, and create these very interesting creatures. These are also available as as an augmented reality filter on Instagram. So you can sort of go to Daejeon.art on Instagram and just try out on their filters tab this Entangled Others sort of Instagram filter. And what was the theme that I kept for this exhibition was essentially this idea of all the artists are working with very sort of common topics like insects, bugs, plants, landscapes, portraits, or uh, human form, flowers, and then taking these very common themes and sort of using AI to imagine an alternate digital reality of these themes. So, sort of commenting on the fact that as we become digitally native creatures, our reality is going to not just be the pure natural reality that we know, but it's going to be this hybrid sort of reality, especially with things like augmented reality and so on, where we'll be able to place these co-generated, co-imagined ideas of reality within our natural reality, uh, and yeah, sort of live in this hybrid kind of world. Um, so yeah, if you're interested, would definitely encourage you to go to terrain.art and check out all these really inspiring AI artists. And read about their practice. There's also videos which sort of introduce their practice, so it'll be a good, uh, almost like a good research material for all of you. And with that, I wanted to end the slides so that we have enough time for Q&A also. And if there's any particular project that you want me to talk a little more about, I am open to doing that. Um, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Arshid, for the talk. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked all your works. They're very interesting, and I believe everyone here also enjoyed the talk. Thank you. So, is there anyone who has any questions regarding his talk or anything to ask or say to him personally? If you have, please come up to the spot where I am, or you can just leave the questions on the chat room. So, is there anyone who has questions? Oh, while we ask for others to ask questions, I have a personal question for you, because I believe there are quite a number of people who who are afraid of the technology, which is constantly developing at a really rapid pace, and the fear that they might end up replacing us humans. But I believe after looking at your talk and all your works, I believe you'll not agree with that, and or actually have the opposite thinking, that as the technology develops, we have more chance to become creative, or unique. So I'd like to know more about your thoughts on this and what you'd like to suggest or give advice to those people with that thinking.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, Eugene. And uh, so definitely, I'm more on the optimistic uh, side of the spectrum rather than the dystopic side of the spectrum, and sort of believe that technology. The idea is for us to engage with technology in much more nuanced and much more complete manner rather than sort of fearing it or only letting the large corporations dictate how technology is going to be used by us, because that is when we might become sort of almost like you know almost like not knowing what is happening with our data, how we are being manipulated into doing certain things that are for the benefit of these large corporations. So instead, if each of us can become more aware of how technology works and be more mindful of our interactions with technologies, then we can really actually use it to deeply sort of enhance our sense of existence, our sense of how we go about doing things in terms of the ideas of augmentation that I showed, in terms of creating new sort of universes of making art which weren't possible before. So, and that is going to be a reality, the reality of sort of transcending into a post-human kind of world where you are not purely sort of reliant on just your physical biological senses, but you're reliant largely on these technological sort of devices that you own that are around you. So you have to start sort of embracing them and actually start adapting to them in a way that becomes beneficial for your purpose rather than sort of fearing it, because it is going to happen. It is inevitable in some sense. So it is more important for us to embrace and have more deeper conversations than the conversations of fear around it.
Um,
And art can become a very interesting way to do that, because people can start relating with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the response. So, we'll have to be more aware and mindful, so and more human actually, in order to make use of the technology itself, and we can become actually more creative, and we can get inspirations from them. So, yeah, thank you for the response. And is there anyone who has any questions for him? You can simply chat, leave us the chat so that we can see. No one? Oh, okay. Oh, he's writing a question for you. Could you just give us a moment?
Sure. If there's any technical questions also, like how
Yeah.
it was made, then
Mm-hmm.
happy to answer them. Yeah.
Uh, okay. So Ki-hong has a question for you. He asked if there is a specific kind of technique you are in you are interested these days for future artworks.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that question. So definitely, I'll continue, and I'm continuing to explore generative adversarial networks, GANs, but also there is some very interesting technology called CLIP, uh, which is becoming quite popular in making AI artworks, where the idea is it's actually a text and image system combined, where you can give a prompt of some text, and the system is able to generate image of that text input and really sort of abstract kind of images. So that is also becoming something very popular and something that I'm starting to explore in my practice also. So yeah, definitely feel free to check that out. I'll actually type it uh, in the chat so that you can get the exact name.
Okay. Okay. Oh, actually, Harshit has his Instagram account. There are many interesting works that he has posted on the Instagram. So we have tagged him in one of the posts using our Art Center Nabi Instagram account. So if you're interested in his works, you can just simply go to his Instagram account and maybe follow him and see the works, explore his works. They're all really interesting. So yeah. So is there any questions? Any more questions for him? Okay. Okay. So everyone is thankful for your presentation, and yeah, I think everyone enjoyed it very much. So yeah.
Yeah, I could also maybe quickly mention the recent INFT sort of artwork that became quite popular. If someone's interested, you should check it out. It was done by this artist Robert Alex, and the idea there was, can you actually put a machine learning system, which was they used a system called GPT-3, which is a text generation system, but very sophisticated, and put that as an NFT where people could give a new prompt, a new sort of starting text, and this NFT could, instead of being like a static image or something, it could actually generate a response to that, and then build a 3D model avatar that would sort of say out the response. So yeah, this idea of digital ownership of an intelligent sort of creature is also very interesting, and I think also with some of the works like Sofia Crespo's the 3D insect that I showed, there is sort of similar relation to that also. So yeah, to check them out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. So if if there isn't any more questions, I think we should end our session here. Is there anyone any more? No. Okay. Thank you so much, Harshit, for the talk, and thank you everyone for coming. I hope everyone enjoyed the program. And before I end, lastly, I would like to remind y'all that tomorrow is the last day of our hackathon, and we'll have the final presentation as well as the demo session for the prototypes and the award ceremony as well. So please don't forget to come tomorrow and see the final outcomes and the winners of the hackathon. And if Harshit, if you also have time, you could join us and see the outcomes. It would be very great. So yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much, Harshit. And thank you, everyone, and hope you'll have a wonderful Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's
Thank
wonderful
you.
being here. Bye.